This is Shout Podcast with Kim Robson, the official health and wellbeing podcast from the Firefighters Charity.
Welcome to episode 8 of season 2 of the Shout podcast, where in this season we're focusing on health and wellbeing and taking a close look at a specific topic or issue. So this time around, it's nutrition. We'll be speaking to the charity's health improvement lead, Greg Lessons, on what we mean by healthy eating and a balanced diet, and finding out more about gut health. We'll hear from Richard Harris, who was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in 2017, but managed to change his lifestyle and get into remission without the need for medication. Greg will be giving us an idea on healthier food alternatives that you might not have considered and healthy eating on a limited budget. We've also got a very special podcast plus from Greg on the importance of hydration. So let's get this episode underway. It's my pleasure to welcome the Firefighters Charity Health Improvement Lead, Greg Lessons. Greg, can you tell us what it is we mean by healthy eating or a balanced diet?
So it's eating a balanced diet, which we've all heard about in the past. But what is a balanced diet is the question. The Western diet that we're all used to eating is characterised by far too much of the wrong types of food that are high in saturated fat, high in sugar or refined sugar, and high in salt. Whereas a balanced diet or a Mediterranean diet is lower in these foods. It's high in fruits and vegetables, so we want to be aiming for a minimum of 5 portions of fruit and veg per day. Ideally 8 to 10 portions per day if you can, and I'll talk later about how you can increase that amount. Lots of hydration, so 8 to 10 glasses of water per day. You can have some cups of tea, some coffee within that will count as well. But yes, remember to have water as well. So that is the kind of crux of a balanced Mediterranean style diet.
I mean, when you lay it out like that, it kind of sounds fairly simple, but one of the things that you pointed out there was the fibre. Fibre is really important to us, isn't it?
It is, and typically people have less than half of the recommended daily amount of fibre that they should have. We're recommended to have 30 grams per day, so 30 grams per day. And to get that, you want to be having that sort of 8 portions of fruit and veg per day, which is where fibre comes from predominantly. You'll also find it in higher amounts in whole grains compared to refined grain. And this is important for 2 reasons. I think most people are aware that it will help improve the digestive process and help keep you regular, so to speak. It will reduce your risk of colon cancer as well, and bowel cancer, so that's very, very important. It can reduce the bad cholesterol in the body, the LDL cholesterol, so that then reduces risk of heart disease and cardiovascular diseases. But there's also another huge reason to have that 30 grams of fibre per day, and it's to feed the healthy gut bacteria that reside in the colon. These thrive on fibre, and if you have plenty of them, and there are trillions in the gut, then they can convey health benefits in terms of improved immune function, improved mental health. Fibre's often overlooked.
You're talking about improving our gut health. It reminded me of the phrase, I have a gut feeling. And that's actually a thing, isn't it? Because what we're eating can affect how we're feeling.
Absolutely. The gut can be thought of as a second brain, and that's because there's an established neuronal connection between the brain and the gut. So we've actually got that communication pathway there, and it works in both directions. So that gut feeling you talk about, or butterflies in the stomach, this is the first place you kind of feel it because of that connection. And that's coming from the brain, our sensory stimulation, down to the gut. But it also can work the other way. If you have a healthy colon with lots of healthy gut bacteria because you've got a diet high in fibre, because maybe you eat some foods that have probiotics within them, such as fermented foods such as yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha, miso. These are your fermented foods. Then you'll have that kind of benefit going back to the brain. So improved cognition, improved mental health, reduced risk of depression and anxiety. So, very important to have that healthy colon. And of course, the opposite to a healthy colon is an unhealthy colon. And that can come from the wrong kinds of foods. So your typical Western diet, as I said earlier, which is high in salt, saturated fat, free sugars, so sugars coming from generally refined sources, but also honey and syrups. That's why they're called free sugars and not just refined sugars anymore. The bad bacteria in the gut thrive on these types of foods. The aim really should be to kind of create a stronghold of beneficial gut bacteria residing in the colon, which can then give you these amazing health benefits, all over the body, and will reduce your risk of obesity as well.
In just a little while, I'm going to get you to give me some advice on how we can actually bring all this into our diet. It's not quite as scary as it sounds. It is possible to do, and how then that can overall make us feel better. But first, we're going to catch up with one of our beneficiaries, Rich Harris, a retired station officer who's actually done something really incredible with his health just by eating better.
You're listening to Shout Podcast from the Firefighters Charity.
So, Rich, thanks for joining us on the podcast today. I'd quite like first for you to just tell us a little bit about your situation. I know that you had type 2 diabetes. Can you tell us how that came about?
If I may, I'm a child of the 70s and 80s, and, I was one of five. This is quite important to understand, and we wasn't poor, but we didn't have excess. So things like desserts only happened on a Sunday when I was a child. So this is a mindset thing which I hate waste, and I still do to an extent. So whatever was put in front of me, I was a bit like a Labrador dog. I would eat all of it. I would not waste anything. I mean, I started in the fire brigade 30 years ago, retired in April. I was 10 stone 10, 28-inch waist. And even there, I remember going to Ilford, my first fire station, and they're eating a dinner in the mess, and I'm thinking, wow, what are we celebrating? It's big food, it's a big plate of food. But even in them days, it wasn't as big as what it was the last decade, if that makes sense. But as time went on, especially when I became an officer, I became quite sedentary at work. I used the gym, but I basically ate anything and everything. 2017, I had to go to the doctors for something. I can't remember what. And like all men, I hadn't been for about 5 or 6 years. Then I got a call back, and I had to see the diabetic nurse. She said to me in 2017, she went, you're pre-diabetic. And then I got called back again in 2018. I got called back, and the diabetic nurse was like a school matron. It was quite good, really, looking back. She went, I told you last year you was pre-diabetic. She goes, you got the full thing there. I went, what do you mean? And she went, you're diabetic. You've got to see the doctor. You've got to have your feet looked at. You've got to have your eyes tested. And it started the ball rolling. I went home. I was a little bit shocked, as it is, and then I started reading up and stuff. And it was the word chronic. It's a chronic disease. I thought, right, I'm going to attack this problem head on. I'm going to get as much information. I could probably do an A-level in diabetes type 2. Then Greg was a massive help, and repeating what my wife got all the diabetes books and the forums and the other websites you can look at, and effectively produced loads of meals with Greg's assistance. I thought, right, you can reverse diabetes. I was probably nearly 15 stone, and I lost 25 kilograms within 4 months, I believe, and reversed it. And the doctor, and Greg, but it's the doctor. I remember sitting there with the doctor, and she was like, she's like your mother figure, really. She said to me, you should be really proud of yourself. And even to this day, I can't really be proud of myself, because you've let yourself go to get into that situation to turn it round. But I suppose it is a big achievement, or was a big achievement at the time. And I've subsequently gone a bit, I wonder if you can turn it around twice, Greg.
Rich, I wish that we could bottle you, because your determination and motivation to do this is quite incredible.
In a way, you take a lot of personal responsibility, but society is at fault because, that abundance of food that you mentioned earlier is there 24/7 at very low cost, and the education hasn't been there really. So this is what's happening all over the world. Obesity is the biggest crisis in the modern world, and no first world country has yet turned it around. So we don't know quite how to go about doing it on a public health scale. So you shouldn't feel embarrassed about it. It's just a case of, okay, what can we do to turn it around? And you know how to do that, and you've done it. So well done you.
To me, the tradition of the mess is very important. That's where we clear the air, that's where we talk about stuff, and that's where the tight bonds exist. But if there's cakes, if there's extra chips, the culture of a fire station is to make as much to throw away. You've got to show a little bit of courage, I suppose, a little bit of a little bit of strength to not have an extra portion of chips. And Greg see me when I didn't have any strength, and whatever was put in front of me, I was eating up because I don't like waste.
Yeah, fair play to you, Rich, because on paper, you were not, everything you're telling me about your early life, I'm like, why did this guy end up this way? Because that just doesn't sound right. But, exactly that. You got in the right mindset. You said, this is not going to be me, and I'm going to get help and I'm going to sort it out. Greg, if I can just quickly ask you, what was it that you did? What advice did you go to Rich with to help him turn this around?
It was a combination of portion control strategies. So things like eating off of a smaller plate, having more fibre on the plate, because fibre will keep you fuller for longer without giving you the added calories, because fibre survives digestion all the way down to the colon and gets fermented by bacteria in the gut that I think I've already mentioned. So essentially it gives you all the health benefits without the calories. Now obviously you still need calories, but it's about not only reducing the amount that you're having, but also changing the quality of those calories. So I got Rich to switch over from white grains to whole grains. As I said earlier, the brown varieties of rice, bread and pasta, and smaller amounts of carbohydrate. And I know the UK government are now prescribing low carbohydrate diets to type 2 diabetics if they're overweight or obese. So if they have a combination of diabetes or type 2 diabetes and they're overweight or obese, that's when I believe they can prescribe that lower carbohydrate diet. I think it's still good to have some, and there's some good evidence behind brown rice, for instance, can help control blood glucose. And of course, like I said, you're getting other micronutrients from these foods, so you don't want to eliminate them, but it's about controlling the amount of them and changing the quality of them, and reducing the amount of free sugar in the diet. So changing Richard's snacks from your typical kind of cakes, biscuits, ice creams, the things that are unfortunately abundant in the workplace, and fire stations are no exception. Changing them over to things like some low-fat yogurt, some berries, a piece of fruit, or some nuts, a handful of nuts, something like that, a couple of squares of dark chocolate instead of milk chocolate. And of course, lots of physical activity.
Guys, we could talk about this together for hours. I know we could, but I think what we should do is just, Rich, congratulate you, because you have achieved so much in such a short space of time, and I know you're going to keep doing it. So well done, because you are an inspiration to anyone else who might be just on the cusp of that slightly bad times.
If I could just say, Kim, if one person, or hopefully more than one, are on the pre-diabetes level, if they listen to this and they get a mindset that they can change it, it's easier to change it at pre-diabetes than it is diabetes.
You're listening to Shout Podcast from the Firefighters Charity.
Greg, all of the bits that you told me earlier on about gut health and what healthy eating is sound great. They also sound a little bit scary in like, how can I actually build this into my diet? But tell me a little bit more about what a Mediterranean diet can entail and how I can do it.
The beauty of the Mediterranean diet is that it's not restrictive and it doesn't exclude any food groups, unlike, other very popular diets in modern times, such as the ketogenic diet, which completely excludes carbohydrate, which it's an important food source, an important food group. Studies have found that it's probably the most acceptable of the dietary patterns, and you can still treat yourself. I think my view is what you do 80% of the time is what matters. So you can still have that cake now and again and have that ice cream now and again, but if you can kind of follow some general principles, for instance, in your cupboards at home, try and have predominantly whole grains. And get creative with how you cook these things. So some people will kind of turn their noses up at these foods. They say they don't like the texture, they don't like the flavour. Well, cook it for a bit longer, and then it will get that texture of the refined version of that grain. So that's one tip. And then the second tip is, for instance, if you're having pasta, then create a homemade sauce for it. A tomato-based sauce with passata or tinned tomatoes. Use herbs, use vegetables such as onion, mushroom, peppers, olives. It's delicious stuff. It's all cooked from scratch. It's not ultra processed. Lots of health benefits. And of course, at the same time then, if you're having that homemade sauce, you're increasing your fruit and vegetable intake. So this is how you get to that kind of upper echelons of 8 to 10 portions of fruit and veg per day, if you kind of cook from scratch and do these things. And it hasn't got to be laborious. You don't have to have 50 ingredients in a recipe. Keep it simple. A bit of garlic, a little bit of chili if you like, some herbs, maybe some mushrooms, onions. Quite simple stuff really. And then for things like brown rice, you can, instead of seasoning with salt, season with herbs and spices like cumin, turmeric. Put some vegetables in there. So if you're having a curry, you can turn your brown rice into mushroom rice, and use those herbs and spices to change the colour and the texture. So instead of looking at a plate of brown rice, you're now looking at yellow rice if you're using some turmeric, for instance. So we eat with our eyes, so you want to make it as attractive as possible too. So we're changing the texture, we can change the flavour, and we can change the aesthetics of the food quite easily, just being a little bit creative. And when it comes to the meat, like I said, just switching over from the red meats to poultry. Predominantly, like I said, having no more than 3 portions of red meat per week. So you want to keep below 500 grams of cooked red meat per week. And then, don't make silly mistakes. And when I say silly mistakes, things like fizzy pop or sugar sweetened beverages, as nutritionists would call them. So, Coca-Cola, lemonade, that kind of thing. Very, very high in free sugars. And if you're going to take one thing away from today, if you drink these drinks, then either switch over to a sugar-free version, or even better, eliminate them completely and just stick with good old water, some tea, coffee, unsweetened ideally, or artificially sweetened. Another tip to get that 5 a day, or minimum of 5 a day, is your mid-morning snack, your afternoon snack, having a piece of fruit instead of a biscuit, instead of a bar of chocolates. You get more fibre, you're getting important vitamins and minerals. You're going to be improving your physical and your mental health all at the same time, and your gut health, as we said earlier. And not forgetting things like nuts and seeds. Try and incorporate them into the diet, and healthy oils. So if you're having a side salad, drizzle some olive oil on it, because lots of good research behind the health properties of extra virgin olive oil, certainly for the heart in particular. And remembering to eat your fish, so there's so many good options within the Mediterranean diet.
What about if we're rushing, if life's just taken over, it's too busy, we're going to get home, we're going to dive our hand into the freezer and grab out a bag of frozen veg or frozen fruit or something like that. Any good?
Just as good, and some would say even better, because those micronutrients, certainly if food's out of season, so certain fruits and vegetables might be shipped in from Nicaragua or wherever, if we're not growing them in this country at that time in the year, then they degrade in the quality of their micronutrients over time and in transit. Whereas if you're using the frozen varieties, it's more likely that the nutrition is kind of locked in at the point of freezing. And of course, you're saving money. So, I'm a big fan of frozen blueberries and frozen vegetables. And, you don't have to keep going to the supermarket every day then. Plus, you're saving some money.
A very insightful episode on healthy eating. If you want to find out more about those topics that we've discussed, just head to our website, firefighterscharity.org.uk/shout podcast, where we've got lots of links to articles and information. Make sure you don't miss any of the main podcast or Shout Podcast Plus episodes by subscribing via your usual platform. And remember, there is a special Shout Podcast Plus episode from Greg on the importance of hydration. Coming up on the next episode in a fortnight's time, we'll be talking living with stress and anxiety. We'll hear from psychological therapists Becca Harp and Izzy Dragonetti, and we'll speak to Louise Moody on how she overcame her anxieties. And of course, we'll make sure you have links to how the charity can help and offer coping mechanisms. Until next time, take care.
Shout Podcast. Please subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcasts, and check out firefighterscharity.org.uk to find out how the Firefighters Charity could support you.